This is Fight Fans Radio.
Let's get ready to rumble! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! And down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AdamCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. Yes, it is another episode, The Low Blow, on Fight Fans Radio, U.S. Combat Sports and Southwest Fight. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez. What's up, man?
Pretty good, man. Glad to turn the page on a terrible NCAA performance by our New Mexico Lobos. And want to watch some fighting, I guess, tonight and this weekend, man.
Yeah, I'm pretty much done with the tournament except Florida Gulf Coast because they dunk a lot.
They're fun to watch. They are fun to watch, man. They're high-flying.
Yeah, just call me when that game's on. Other than that, I'll be watching Bellator.
Friday night, man. Friday night. I'm gonna miss it, but I'll definitely be recording it.
So on this edition of The Low Blow, no guest but a packed episode. We're going to talk about this Robert Guerrero saga. It seems like he almost pulled a Plaxico Burress when first reading about the story, but it seems like he might be able to get this gun charge cleared up in a hurry, so we'll talk about that. We'll break down the big rematch for this weekend, man. I remember you telling me about this fight 1 year ago between Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado. Actually, 6 months ago. This fight took place, I think, in October. So those two are set to get it on. Again, Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about a lot of drama within MMA, dealing with the Athletic Commission, specifically this whole weigh-in issue with George St. Pierre and Nick Diaz. We'll also talk about the ESPN piece that was shown, I think this week. It was online about the man with Down syndrome competing in MMA. Lots of controversy with that. And we'll also give you the latest news concerning Holly Holm and Cecilia Braekhus. That broke on ringtv.com right after our show ended. So we'll talk about that. We'll also give you a review of World Series of Fighting. And we'll preview this weekend's Warehouse Rumble 3 taking place in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So all that on deck for today's show. So, man, let's get into the standing 8 count, and you have the latest news concerning Robert Guerrero arrested for gun possession at JFK Airport.
For those of you that haven't heard, Robert Guerrero, and in case you've been under a rock or just don't follow boxing, Robert Guerrero is the next opponent for Floyd Mayweather Jr., May 4th. Today, he got arrested for gun possession at JFK Airport. Charges are pending, according to New York Daily News. Guerrero did, go ahead and he did go to an arraignment. He was arrested at the airport, but apparently, what it sounds like is that Robert Guerrero is an avid hunter, and the hunting television show in New York City, which he was on and which was being interviewed for, actually asked him to bring in his gun to be able to, of course, do their story on the program. Kind of weird that Robert Guerrero didn't do his research, or maybe he did, on New York. It's possible that they let him go. It's not specific if he had bullets or not, but he was actually carrying an unloaded .40 caliber Smith & Wesson semi-automatic on his way to the 10 a.m. flight from New York to Las Vegas. Las Vegas is where he's currently based for his training camp. Robert Guerrero, as many boxing fans know, he hails from Northern California, Gilroy, California, but his camp is in Las Vegas. So pretty crazy when I heard about this, man. I was shocked that someone, this intelligent, or at least he appears to be intelligent. We've had the chance to interview him before. And also, this close to the biggest payday of your life, that he would do something like this. But apparently if, the New York law enforcement and, law offices let him go, it must have not been too bad. I don't think it was Plaxico where it was a loaded gun and Plaxico shot himself like Cheddar Bob on 8 Mile, man. I don't think it's anything like that.
Well, thank goodness. I just think his camp, everybody knows New York has tough gun laws. I don't think that takes a genius, again, to put 2 and 2 together. So luckily, I don't think this is too serious, and hopefully he'll get off with like a warning or probation or something. World Series of Fighting held their second event this past weekend, and with Josh Berkman's win this past weekend, he earned a shot against John Fitch. Interesting enough, even though Ray Cephal announced today that it'll be those two men will battle in World Series of Fighting 3, one, it won't be for any kind of title fight in that organization. And two, Berkman was really interested in the fight when interviewed by Boss Rude, and after he won, he said pretty much that John Fitch had to earn his way in order to fight Josh Berkman, which was kind of strange considering John Fitch is ranked way ahead of him and he's just a better fighter. So for Josh Berkman just to play that card when he only had one event was kind of weird. But nevertheless, those two are set to fight, I believe, for their next event, June 14th in Las Vegas. A venue has yet to be announced, but that should be an interesting fight. Berkman looked pretty impressive in his outing this past Saturday.
Yep, man. In other news and not so new news, Lamont Peterson fails another drug test. The IBF junior welterweight titleist Lamont Peterson has failed another post-fight drug test, this time test positive for HCG, after his February 22nd win over Kendall Holt, which was actually a pretty good fight. If you guys haven't actually seen that, find it on whatever outlets you use to find these fights, and make sure you check it out. So Peterson was fighting for the first time since 2011 when he beat Amir Khan, and he tested positive for synthetic testosterone. Again, that was the previous time he tested positive. The fight with Holt did take place on ESPN Friday Night Fights, and who knows what's next. The HCG is known primarily as a fertility drug for women, but we also use, as you remember, many of you sports fans might remember, Manny Ramirez was actually popped for the same thing. So it'll be interesting to see how the commission actually takes to Lamont Peterson's situation. Kind of silly, man. I mean, why would you keep testing the boundaries if you were this guy, for goodness sake?
I don't know, man. I mean, you could say the same thing about Josh Barnett, and then, look at him years later. No one really talks about him failing those tests, even though he's failed multiple times. So it's one of those things in society that I think people, over enough time, if you just apologize, people are going to cut you a break, sadly. I'm right or wrong. A study has come out by the American Academy of Neurology titled Structural and Functional Brain Changes in Boxers and Mixed Martial Arts Fighters Are Correlated to Fight Exposure. Now, there's been a lot of debate over the years of just if mixed martial arts or boxing, which sport is the safer sport or not. And what was found is pretty much in both sports, when you start your career at age 15, there appears to be a volume reduction in certain areas of brain and reduced connectivity between different regions of the brain. So it seems like, it doesn't take a genius to find out that you're going to get some long-term brain trauma in fighting in mixed martial arts. But one thing I've always wondered, maybe this is me being ignorant, I don't really know, is just when guys are in, when they're choked out, does that affect your brain at all? I always wondered if that, you're cutting oxygen off. I'm just very curious if guys are, choked out multiple times in their fight career, if that shows any damage. I'm not like saying yes or no. I was always curious about that in terms of the submission and mixed martial arts. But this study, I don't think proves to be anything shocking at all.
Yep, and also UFC news. This is pretty good news for UFC 158 as far as the pay-per-view numbers. They appear to be much higher than originally reported. Why it's taken them so long to calculate all this, I'm not sure. Usually with boxing, you'll hear the numbers within 6, 7, 8 days of when the event actually took place. So early estimates were that the buy rate were somewhere around the 800,000 range, but it could be as high as 1 million, man, even 1.1 million, which is surprising. It's surprising to me. I thought the fight would do somewhere around 700 or 800,000, and that's what it did. But for it to do over 1 million, I mean, that's big boxing type stuff right there, man. It just shows you. It just shows you how much of how intrigued people are with Diaz, and how much how much of a fan base George St. Pierre actually has. So a lot of casual fans, I think, turned into this one, and I think Nick Diaz is to thank for a lot of them to come on board.
Yeah, that's pretty bizarre because, Luke Thomas in his chat said that the 1.1 million number is not true at all. He says it's way lower than that, so I don't know who to believe.
What do we think it's true?
I think it's around...
If you had to guess, see, because I thought, I'm not going to lie, I thought it was going to be around 700 maybe if I would have first guessed it. 800,000 surprised me, but, I wasn't blown away.
Well, 750 is what Conda did, so I thought I'd do more than that just because of trash talk. I was, 800,000 what I thought. I think it's around maybe 875, 900. I don't think it's more than that. But with UFC pay-per-view numbers is so weird because it's not the UFC giving out these numbers. It's not like a press release saying, oh, UFC did 1 million. It's usually insiders telling Dave Meltzer or Kevin Aioli this. And those numbers are some kinds inaccurate. Like we saw, if you remember, Brock Lesnar versus Alistair Overeem, that was around, 1 million or so. And then I guess there was a correction months later saying it only did around 575K. So I don't know if you could take these numbers as serious as some people are on Twitter and on the internet. It's kind of weird. Looks like Timothy Bradley is going to see a concussion specialist following his bout over Prononikov this past weekend. If you remember that fight, Timothy Bradley was in a war and involved in really a fight of the year candidate against Ruslan Provodnikov on March 16th. Pretty much, he took tons of punishment. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jorge, I think that's pretty much the fight that he took in the most punishment in his entire career.
Definitely. Hands down. No, without question, man. You're right.
Here's this quote here. It's not about the money or fame. Health is number one. I'm going to do whatever he tells me to do. If it takes 3 or 4 weeks off, then I will. If he says I can come back in 2 months, then I want to do that. I made an appointment with him. He's a really busy guy, and that's as soon as I can get with him. So he's talking about the concussion specialist. So I think that's a good thing. I'm not sure if the commission kind of put that up to him or if that's just, him just looking out for his health. But whatever the reason, that's good to see his health come in first instead of his career.
Question for you, Jay. Did you see the post-fight interview Timothy Bradley had with Max Kellerman, where he asked him, he's like, you took a lot of punishment. He's like, what'd you think? He's like, I'm pretty sure I have a concussion. And Max Kellerman asked him, how do you know you have a concussion? He's like, because I'm still dizzy talking to you.
Yeah, I remember that.
So by all means, I mean, Bradley gained a lot of respect from people, and that was, surprisingly, I don't think people thought this would be fight of the year or one of the fights of the year. I mean, without question, I don't think anyone said, hey, this is going to be a hell of a fight. And the guys, built themselves. Bradley gained a lot of respect, and Provodnikov put his name on the map, even with a loss. So, I mean, one hell of a fight, and by all means, Bradley deserves to take the time off just because you want him to be healthy, and you see what's gone on with a lot of these guys. Kind of local news that happens here: UFC veteran Melvin Gillard, who first said that he was coming back to Jackson's, and then he was actually not allowed in. Him and Authentic Sports Management part ways. A rep for Authentic Sports Management did confirm with MMA Junkie that the management firm has parted ways with the UFC lightweights, whose, again, announcement to rejoining Jackson's Winklejohn's MMA, saying that he was going to leave Black Zillions, was rebuffed. So whenever it comes to Gillard, I mean, he's a pretty interesting guy. Has lost 4 out of his last 5 fights and is just looking to revamp his career. And he was looking to return back to Jackson's, where he had a lot of his success. But unfortunately, the team turned him away, man. Pretty interesting situation that happened last week.
Yeah, it is pretty bizarre. Manny Pacquiao looks to return to the ring in September. I think he's still recovering from that huge knockout loss to Juan Manuel Marquez in December. But it looks like he told the Manila Standard just to be patient. Him and Bob Arum are discussing. Looks like he'll definitely come back in September. This is 2 straight losses in a row. I think a lot of people don't even consider the Timothy Bradley loss an actual defeat on Pacquiao's record, but nevertheless, that's 2 in a row. What do you think is next for Pacquiao, just real quickly, man? I mean, he's kind of at a crossroads. That fight with Floyd Mayweather seems to be up in smoke. What's really left for him to do exactly?
Well, the only thing for him to do is to fight maybe the winner of this weekend's fight between Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado. I think Top Rank is still trying to build a name out of Brandon Rios. And if he could beat someone as notable as Manny Pacquiao, then that'll help him spread across the mainstream sports market. So for people to know his name. So I think the next thing is a fight with him. I can't see any other situation. Maybe a rematch with Timothy Bradley down the line. Marcus already says he doesn't want another fight, and Pacquiao isn't going to search for that 4th fight against Marcus if he doesn't want it. So. Mm-hmm. So definitely a 5th fight, excuse me, right? Is that what that is?
5th. Yeah, they fought so many times, man. It's so hard to keep up.
So definitely, something, and I think they want to milk Manny for all he's got. And when I say they, I mean Top Rank and Bob Arum, and they want to build up their next superstar. So why not let it be Brandon Rios? He's an exciting fighter, not the best technical fighter in the world, but he is a very exciting fighter.
Mm-hmm. Since we're on this topic, if Rios, beats Alvarado and he fights Pacquiao and beats him, is there a ceiling him being on at Top Rank and at HBO, considering what's happened with this whole HBO Showtime saga. I mean, how popular can it get if all the Golden Boy fighters are on Showtime? If Showtime's flourishing, what's really his kind of value in terms of him being a big star on an HBO platform? And how big can he get if all the fighters that are well known are on Golden Boy and on Showtime?
And are you referring to Brandon Rios?
I am, yeah.
Okay, so it's pretty tough. It's going to be hard. You're right, because all the notable fighters. Well, I shouldn't say all of them. Top Rank does have a decent amount of guys, but
sure,
for Brandon Rios to gain this popularity that they're trying to get him to achieve, he will have to just destroy some of these guys. Let's say he wins this fight, a victory over Danny Garcia or Lucas Matisse at that weight class, without a doubt, will put him in the top 5 pound for pound fighters list, I think. So the weight class does have some decent amount of fighters, but again, as you mentioned, Danny Garcia and Lucas Matisse, what company are they with? Golden Boy. It's going to be very difficult for him to get those kind of fights. So unless he goes up to welterweight and fights a lot of those guys within that weight class that don't have an allegiance to any of these guys. What if he goes up and fights Timothy Bradley? Timothy Bradley is a top-ranked fighter. That might be a good fight for him also. Juan Manuel Marquez would be a really good fight, I think, for him to gain popularity. Think about this. He fights Manny Pacquiao. He wins, and then he fights Juan Manuel Marquez, and he beats him. I mean, how can this guy not be a, if not a household name, close to a household name, if he does pull off 2 victories against 2 legends? That's the only way.
That'd be huge.
Yeah, that's the only way, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. Again, we're the Low Blow Radio. We're live on Fight Fans Radio. You can get in touch with Fight Fans Radio via Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Ustream. You can get in touch with our show via email through lowblow505@gmail.com. Also through Facebook, through the Low Blow Podcast. Just type that into the search. Also, our Twitter handle is @the Low Blow. We're available on Stitcher and iTunes every single Thursday night. So let's get to 2 rounds. Basically, it's me and Jorge's thoughts on whatever's bugging us or catches our eye in the combat sports world. Do you want to go first, or should I take it off first?
I can go first. I can go first. Just because, just because of the local aspect, I guess. I mean, many people aren't too familiar with the fight scene here in Albuquerque and here in New Mexico. We got a pretty good card that pins a lot of local fighters together, and that's what I don't like. I wish the promoters here locally would pay some of these fighters to come from Arizona, Colorado, or Texas to fight our local guys. It's, I don't like the fact that our own guys have to fight each other to build these names. Tomorrow there'll be a pretty good fight between a local guy, Matthew Baca, who's 2-0, and another guy, Jordan Hernandez, who's also 2-0. Matthew Baca is signed to Holly Holm's promotion. They're the only 2 fighters signed to it. The promotion hopes that he's going to show a lot of promise, but he's in pretty deep with a pretty good opponent in Jordan Hernandez, who's 10 years his elder. Baca is 19 and Jordan is 29. I would have loved for them to be on this card, but to face guys outside of the state to try to build a record and not to beat up on each other, man. I just don't like the fact that these guys are trying to build their records against each other here. I wish a little bit more. I mean, bring fighters from Oklahoma or whatever, any neighboring state. But I mean, that's what kind of irritated me over the past couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about in the past how Iron Boy Promotions out of Arizona, they do a good job of getting the Southwestern fighters to actually meet in one place. So you're seeing a lot of matchups between, a small town fighter out of New Mexico fight a small town fighter out of Arizona. It's usually it's not state versus state matchups in terms of Arizona versus Arizona, New Mexico versus New Mexico. Mm-hmm. It's that way. It's easier for fans that might not know the fighter to cheer for too. They might get into the local guy as opposed to just not knowing who to really go for when there's 2 local guys fighting. So, guess my thing is just it's all these commission issues. We're gonna talk about it more later on, but this specifically with this George St. Pierre and Nick Diaz drama, specifically when it comes to Nick Diaz and George St. Pierre, I don't see the issue. George St. Pierre did come in on weight, to my knowledge, unless the scale somebody lied and misread the scale. I rewatched the weigh-ins of UFC 158. The commission person said 170. So, to my knowledge, I don't really get the controversy unless someone was lying on that scale. I don't know if that's I think that was a digital scale. So maybe I don't know technology. They keep records digitally of what he really weighed in as, but to my knowledge, it was 170. I just think, Nick Diaz in his camp just comes off just kind of the sore losers. And I guess the fascination of people with this guy, I understand it somewhat. I understand the tough guy image, the bad boy image, but just the whininess that continues with Nick Diaz every single fight, it's just so taxing. Just to follow this guy's news is just so annoying. But we'll get to this weigh-in drama later on. But I just think with Nick Diaz, him thinking that he can get the title vacated or GSP's going to give him an automatic rematch, he's out of his mind. So let's get to the Warehouse Rumble 3 preview real quickly, Jorge. The weigh-ins took place earlier today. The fights are tomorrow. The first bell starts at 7, doors open at 6. It's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at the Will Warehouse at the Youth Development. I think YDI. I don't know what the I stands for. Okay. But it's presented by Chavez Promotions. 4 fights on the card. What catches your eye on this card for people that might not be familiar with the whole New Mexico fight scene? Which fight should they be kind of paying attention to?
A couple of fights. It has to be the main event and the co-main event. In the main event, you have Josh Torres, who has built himself. The guy's 10-2 with 1 draw. Has built himself, and to be honest, he should probably be 11-1. I was in his fight in Colorado last summer and thought he squeaked that one out, but it could have gone either way. I'm not gonna lie. But Josh Torres, very tough guy here from Albuquerque, was training under Johnny Tapia, 5-time world champion, up until his death, and Josh is actually fighting a young up-and-coming fighter by the name of Jose Luis Sanchez, who's only 2-0. I'm surprised the commission actually let this fight happen because Josh Torres already has 13 career fights and Jose Luis Sanchez only has 2. Very interesting that they even allowed that to happen. I think what they did is took Sanchez's amateur record into perspective just because of the fact he has over 100 amateur fights. But still, I thought it was pretty interesting that they did allow the fight to happen. Either way, Josh Torres posted on his Facebook page that, this fight, I might not gain much from it, but he's like, I'm going in against a hungry lion, so I better step up. And I think he might be, if he's taking this lightly, Jose Luis Sanchez is very technical, so that should be a very good one. And again, I've discussed this before, the Jordan Hernandez versus Matthew Baca. Jordan Hernandez is 29 years old. He actually was born in Cuba, been here for most of his life. Matthew Baca, young up-and-coming fighter. They're both 2-0. I'm surprised Matthew Baca's camp actually wanted this fight because I thought they'd take it easy for the first 5 fights or so of his career. But I love the fact that there's just like, you know what? This guy's one of the best in the weight class in the state. Let's do it. So 2 very good fights. And just to round it up, it's only 4 fights, but the card is loaded with local talent. Nohemi Dennison fights out of Jackson. She's fighting Amanda Crespin. Nohemi Dennison actually holds a 2-0 record against Amanda Crespin. Crespin is potentially set to fight for a WBC title in Mexico, is what she told me. That's what she hopes for her next fight to be. One more fight, Joanatu Hogue, who fights out of Farmington, going to fight a young up-and-coming fighter by the name of Jason Sanchez. To be honest, if you ask me of the young crop of fighters who has the most potential, I think it's Jason Sanchez. This kid's incredible. He just turned, I believe he just graduated. He just turned 18 a few months ago, so he just was able to turn pro. Incredible fighter, and he is the younger brother of Jose Luis Sanchez. So you got 2 Sanchez's brothers on the card. Should be a pretty damn good night of boxing here locally, man.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see the Wool Warehouse going from here? Do you see with Chavez Promotions always being confined to one specific spot, or do you see them expanding into more of a big-time player in the Albuquerque area in terms of local fights?
I think little by little, Mr. Chavez, who actually runs the promotion, he was formerly on the New Mexico State Commission, so he has a fair idea of how to run things. But that YDI Wool Warehouse, they enjoy the venue. It only fits about 500-600 people, but it's like a movie theater. It feels like a vintage feeling of a fight that you may have seen in New York in the 1940s and 1930s. So pretty awesome the way that's actually structured. So that would be it's pretty interesting because they did try the Kiva Auditorium. They didn't get too big of a turnout. The Kiva Auditorium probably holds about 2,100 fans. So
I think the YDI Center, they're actually trying to set it up as the New Mexico Boxing Hall of Fame. So I think they might actually stay there for a little bit. And their bigger shows, they might expand. But in the meantime, to get that old club boxing feeling, I think the YDI Wool Warehouse is a pretty good place to stay. But if they ever have fights that are just, obviously going to outgrow that, then use the other venues every once in a while.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's the Wool Warehouse 3. That's going down tomorrow. There's limited tickets on sale, so if you want to go, please get them pretty quickly. Do you know how people can get a hold of those tickets?
Yeah, they can actually contact Isabel Chavez, who's part of the promotions company. The phone number is 505-261-1502. Again, 505-261-1502. And I'd be surprised if they have more than 20 tickets available, man. I mean, these went quick. They've nearly been sold out for a couple of weeks now.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to the World Series of Fighting. I don't think you have to spend too much time breaking down every single fight in this card. But just considering all the issues they had of trying to fly in the cage and the pads for setting the cage up, and there's drama surrounding if this event was going to even happen. Not to mention what just went down with the actual event, with this Berkman's post-fight comments. What do you think of the World Series of Fighting? The main event featured Anthony Johnson fighting at heavyweight. He's not really a heavyweight; he's more of a light heavyweight fighter. He defeated Andre Arlovski, and it's an okay fight, but not the greatest fight in the world. Marlon Morales defeated Tyson Nam in a great fight via head kick first round. Paulo Filho was very weird, with Dave Branch getting a victory over him. Josh Bergman, aforementioned, got the KO victory via knee round 1, 304 over Aaron Simpson. What do you think of this promotion, man?
It's all right, man. I mean, if it's on a dead weekend the way it was this weekend with a lot of those, not the big fights or big boxing fights going on, well, then by all means, I feel like watching it. But it does feel like I'm watching a minor league version of the UFC, and I'm not even talking about AAA. It feels like I'm watching a AA game, to be honest. They got some big names. Hopefully, getting a few more events out of their way, they're able to build this a little bit, but I don't think it's anywhere near the level of even Bellator, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And I just think there are problems with this flying in all their equipment to set up this event. Just kind of shows how minor league they are. I think that reflected really bad on them, because if that event was canceled, I mean, besides the organization, you're really hurting the careers of all the guys who fight in that card. You're costing them their livelihood and the sacrifice they made for the much training for those fights. So I'm glad the event happened. I think it's interesting, their model. Bellator is criticized for not signing John Fitch to the roster, but now it seems like it might be paying dividends. Bellator growing their homegrown talent instead of using a lot of USC cast-offs. So very interesting strategies between World Series of Fighting and Bellator. I do think World Series of Fighting will get better. I'm sure Bellator, they started off on ESPN2. They're on, ESPN to Sport Desk. I don't think they had the spotlight compared to World Series of Fighting. So I'm sure there's mistakes made with Bellator too. So if there's organizations here to stay, if Ray Cepho is really serious about this organization thriving in the future, I'm sure he'll learn from this and they'll improve. But certainly it wasn't the best event that World Series of Fighting could have had. Their ratings were good, to my knowledge. They were higher than the first event, but still some problems there.
And earlier, actually, did you see the link I just actually sent you of Heather Clark's arm broken?
I did, yeah. Heather Clark fought Felice Hellrig on the Bellator 94 prelims. Felice Hellrig got the victory. Clark threw a punch after the fight was over because Hellrig screamed in her face, but it seems like Heather Clark, I think that's her arm, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't tell. Okay. Yeah, it looks like her broke her arm in the beginning of the second, according to Heather Clark's Facebook page. So,
and
very
it's
tough.
It's a clean break, dude.
Yeah.
You take a look at it.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty ugly. Tough. That even begs more of the question of why you punch her after the fight's over. Maybe she was really angry.
Is that the arm
off the pain.
punched with? Let me see what arm that actually looks to be. That appears to be if it's laying flat, or which way? Oh no, she's holding like a muscle, so that may be her. Is that her left arm? What arm did she throw at?
I don't remember. I mean, I have to take a look at the video again.
It's the right arm. Yeah, it's the right arm in this X-ray.
Yeah. It's too bad. I mean, that's probably why she wanted to kickbox with her instead of going for the takedown, and probably why she gave up top position. Felice dominated her on the ground in rounds 2 and 3. Still a lot of guts. I think she'll get in trouble for throwing that punch. That's just a big no-no in just fight sports in general, man. You just don't do that. I don't think the penalty will be as much as Paul Daly against Josh Koscheck, but certainly I think there's going to be a decent amount of consequences dealing with that whole situation. You just broke this news here real quickly, Jorge, about UFC 162. Frankie Edgar against Charles Oliveira and Dennis Seaver against Cub Swanson. So, to best of your knowledge, man, do you know the main event of that card? Is that going to be Frankie Edgar and Charles Oliveira?
It might be. I mean, UFC 162. That might be the. If I'm not sure if Erica knows who the main event is on there, but I think it might be it. It wasn't Silva supposed to fight on that card?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Yep. There you go.
Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman, right?
Yeah, I get the numbers so confused. I can't keep track.
Yeah,
but.
no, you can't keep track of this, but interesting because Roger Gracie and Tim Kennedy are supposed to fight on that one too. I guess it's going to turn into a decent card with the addition of these two fights.
Yeah, the UFC wants to make their summer cards in either June or July. They're kind of, for lack of a better term, WrestleMania type of cards. Big time events in Vegas. So I'm sure they want a stacked lineup. They already announced the Fan Fest they usually do every year. So it's going to be a big event for sure in July.
Yeah, and again, that news came from MMA Junkie. Make sure we cite your sources.
Always. I want to get to some of these commission issues, man. Specifically with George St. Pierre and Nick Diaz. There was a video that got released on YouTube that was quickly taken down. And I think it might still be up. I'm not sure because I saw the video and the UFC was actively trying to take this video down off of that website. The video shows I think a UFC representative going to Nick Diaz's camp and stating that as long as George St. Pierre weighs in at 170.6 or 170.8 around that margin, that is just as good as 170 on the dot. After that, Nick Diaz was basically worried that George St. Pierre was not going to make weight. We overhear him talking. But from what we saw in the weigh-ins, George St. Pierre weighed in at 170. So either somebody was lying or he was really at 170. We don't really know the answer to that question. What do you think about this situation, Jorge, if you can compare it to boxing? To your knowledge, if there's a title fight, you have to weigh in exactly on the dot. Is that correct in most cases?
Yeah, in most cases, unless it's specifically in the contract, there's a plus or minus a pound. I mean,
Okay.
the UFC to me, I mean, I'm completely ignorant when it comes to weigh-ins for championship fights. I always thought for whatever reason there was a plus or minus one when it came to championship fights in the UFC, but I may be completely mistaken. But with boxing, it's pretty strict. You have to weigh in at or slightly below the limit. We saw Brandon Rios and a lot of other guys be stripped of their titles because they weighed in either a pound or a couple of pounds over from what they were contracted at. Adrian Broner was one guy, and Brandon Rios, two very notable fighters in the game who couldn't make the weight. They eventually ended up going up for their next fights, but did lose the titles. So very strict when it comes to boxing. In the UFC, very interesting to see what they would have done. I mean, would they have stripped George? What would they have done with that title? It's beyond me what would have actually happened. But for them to say that, if 170 is 170, man, if you're over, you have to cut that weight.
Correct. What he said, he would have had an hour to cut the weight. So
Why
if
didn't
he,
they go with, this is beyond me, man. This is beyond my understanding.
well, this is a bizarre situation. It looks like Quebec could be in a lot of trouble. We'll see what happens. I think what Eric is saying here is that you have to be plus or minus 1 pound for non-title fights. My knowledge is I thought you had to be 170 exactly.
For non-title fights, though. So
For non-title. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, she's right. For non-title, yeah, you get a 1 pound allowance basically. But for title fights, you have to be on exactly. So that's very interesting. I want to talk to you real quickly, Jorge, about these situations with Fallon Fox. That's still in the news. Cain Velasquez came out and said that she shouldn't be allowed to fight women's MMA. We've seen a bunch of women's fighters come out and say they don't want to fight her. Now there's this issue with a man with Down syndrome who had trained with the American Top Team. He was in a profile piece on ESPN. He had his first MMA fight. I think they showed footage of him having kind of an exhibition, but they actually put him in there in a real fight, 3 rounds. Um, he was okay. He took a punch, and then pretty much it was back and forth. I kind of questioned that was really an MMA fight because at the end the referee kind of raised both their hands. So I'm not. They didn't really get the result of who won or who lost the fight. So I'm still questioning if that was a real MMA fight or not. It seemed like it to me from the footage I saw, but from the aftermath, it seemed kind of suspicious. What do you think about that? Somebody with Down syndrome competing with MMA, because a lot of people are conflicted with this. On one side, you have is a very inspiring story of heart and toughness and belonging. At the other end, this person's risking their health in there, and if they can't, effectively defend themselves in a correct fashion or enough to which they can protect themselves, this could be a really dangerous situation. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I'm no doctor and I don't pretend to be one, but if you ask me when it comes to, Down syndrome, wouldn't you think, I have a couple of relatives that actually have Down syndrome, but, I'm completely ignorant when it does come to it. I mean, are there levels of this and how could you even, how would you even be able to gauge it? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if someone is, if someone can compete, why not let them compete? This is completely different from someone having a sex change, if you ask me. If someone with the sex change, they would have to disqualify themselves from either sport. Ultimately, maybe 10, 20 years or whatever, this might be the next, I guess, revolution of American mentality is how we feel about transgender people. I mean, currently we're going with the straight and gay thing right now. You can see, nationwide, and, the rest of the world's looking at us, just shaking their heads like we're crazy. But as far as, when it compares Down syndrome to something like a sex change, I think without question, depends on how, I guess, the levels varies within the individual. If the individual, has a talent to participate and would be okay participating, why not? But when it comes to the sex change, that's what I have an issue with. I think you disqualify yourself from either sport because of that.
Yeah, well, the fighter with Down syndrome, I was to take that first. From the report, they said he's highly functioning for somebody with the Down syndrome. He still has to live with his parents, but if you
But
see him,
Justin,
oh yeah,
did you say the Down syndrome?
oh, I'm sorry, Down syndrome. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Um, my bad. But it seems he's very highly functioning. If you see the fight, he had a nice double leg takedown. Even Matthew Hunt complimented on his takedown skills. So. Um, I'm trying to read here. I'm kind of distracted, but they said that he's with the American top team, so it's not like he's with some rinky-dink MMA um,
Not like he's fighting out of
MMA
his
camp at all.
it's not his grandma's garage. America Top
No,
Team is pretty good when it comes
I
to.
don't believe they put him in there to risk his health. I just don't
Definitely
think.
not.
I just think from a PR standpoint, I don't think they risk that hurting their school. So, I, to me, he has to at least be able to defend himself pretty decently in order to go in there. And I think they would have pretty much tried to break him, honestly, before putting him in the cage. So I think if you see that report again, one of his jiu-jitsu coaches clearly states he treats him the hardest compared to his other students because I think they want to see how tough he is. So he passes all those tests. So it seems to me that they think he can fight in there.
And
So
then this is definitely where the commission would have to take action. Evaluate this guy, see how he's done in his amateur fights, and even take it another step further. See how he does in practice.
yeah,
Go evaluate this. This is your job to make sure that everyone is safe, and you can make a judgment call off of that. Don't make a judgment call just because of something he has.
yeah.
It makes no sense for you to be able to do that and deprive the kid of that.
Yeah, it's just the only thing is if he can defend himself in a rational fashion, I have no problem with it.
And I agree.
Because yeah, this if he has some motor skills. I think dealing with Fallon Fox, that's a more complicated issue because you are dealing with somebody that could have an advantage going into the cage against somebody who's naturally a woman. But to me, I think there has to be more studies to be done. I think a lot of it's like speculative information. I just think I would like to see some more concrete data before making a rational decision. I don't think that's going to be done. I think it's just a lot of kind of guessing and it's a lot of assuming things instead of really trying to find out the bottom of the issue. I think just because of being accused of being discriminatory, I think Fallon Fox will be able to fight. I guess I'm going to see a multi-million-dollar lawsuit being there. I don't think she'll ever fight in the UFC. I think Invicta that could happen. I can see it getting really ugly. If the commission allows her to fight, that opens Pandora's box because if the commission allows her to fight, how can a organization deny her? I mean, then you're in a whole different issue. So I think there needs to be studies to be done, but I just think that's that's beyond the pay grade of any athletic commission, at least in America, to my knowledge. So man, I guess let's preview this big rematch between Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado. The first fight was a classic. You were telling me around when this fight was being made that this is going to be fight of the year easily, and it was. It seems like the corner of Mike Alvarado, if you watch kind of the special hyping up this fight, they're kind of encouraging him to box a little bit more with Rios, but he clearly didn't do that. And I think when he was winning. Can you kind of break down the strategy of Alvarado and Rios just in terms of them living up to the hype of this fight? Do you think there's any pressure of them trying to recapture the magic of their first bout, or they're just looking to win?
I think they've already given us the thrill, so I think people would be okay. I cannot see this fight being a boring fight just because both guys are not boring fighters. When it does come to Mike Alvarado, he does have the boxing skills, and he didn't use them against Brandon Rios. He did use them in spurts early in the fight, but he got suckered into a brawl. And, early on he was able to take the shots, and toward the end, Brandon Rios was slightly able to, actually wear down Mike Alvarado. But if he boxes from a distance, I think Mike Alvarado wins this fight. And we saw Brandon Rios have trouble with Richard Abril last year against a technical boxer. And if Mike Alvarado sticks to his roots of just boxing. But here's the thing about Mike Alvarado. He's not a technical fighter. He's a puncher boxer, is what a lot of people don't understand, and I haven't heard many people say. But that's exactly what Mike Alvarado say. He is not a technician like Juan Manuel Marquez. He can fight technically for spurts. Brandon Rios only knows, one style, interior, phone booth. This guy wants you in the trenches, whether it be in the middle of the ring or whether it be up against the ropes. And Mike Alvarado wins this fight if he dances around Brandon Rios in the middle of the ring. Otherwise, Rios might end up stopping him again. This fight is taking place in Las Vegas, which actually is a neutral court, if you will, for these guys. The last time they fought, it did take place in Los Angeles. Brandon Rios, of course, has been training for about 7-8 years out of the Robert Garcia boxing gym in the Las Vegas metropolitan area. So he had a lot of fans there. Please believe that in Las Vegas, you're going to see some Denver fans there for Mike Alvarado. It's not going to be an overloading amount, but at least he'll have that. So definitely looking forward to this one. And Erica, I hope you watched that damn fight. I posted it on your Facebook page.
It's a classic. It's a must-see. You won't be bored, I guarantee you. And it features, I think, one of the best rounds you'll see in boxing in a long time. I forgot what round it was, either round 5 or round 6, was it?
But maybe a round where they would just go epic back and forth.
Yeah.
I think it was round 5 because it ended in round 7, I believe. So it was either 5 or 6. You're right.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Just in terms of the rewards for specifically Mike Alvarado, we've been talking more about Brandon Rios' future. What about Alvarado if he wins this fight, especially if he manages to finish him? Do you see maybe a third fight set up? Do you see Alvarado's kind of stealing Brandon Rios' thunder and moving on? What do you see for him if he wins?
I think without a doubt there'll be a third fight with these guys. Bob Arum's trying to build the top rank, as we've mentioned with the departure of Manny Pacquiao. With both guys, Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado, signed to the promotion. Without a doubt, it'll be a third fight, and who knows? I bet they put the third fight on pay-per-view, even though they're not that well known. People are going to tune in to a fight they know is going to be incredible. So, for these two guys, again, the issue is the other fighters in their division are with Golden Boy, Danny Garcia, Lucas Matisse, Lamont Peterson, Amir Khan. All those guys are with Golden Boy. So for them to be able to get a fight with them might be difficult. I see there's another undefeated fighter by the name of Kareem Mayfield who fights out of San Francisco, who is undefeated in that weight class. That might be another possibility for these guys. Humberto Soto, who I'm a big fan of, but is not well known here in the United States by mainstream fans. So it's going to be very difficult for these guys to build a name anywhere else unless, one, they fight each other again or they move up to welterweight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's gonna be another barn burner for sure.
What do you got? Who do you got?
Man, it's tough. I think because you mentioned earlier his performance against Abril, I think kind of didn't really impress me too much, despite that came before the first fight with Alvarado. Um, I think I like, man, it's so tough. I think I like Alvarado in this one, man. I just
Ooh.
think, to me, with Brandon Rios, he's just so inconsistent. He has to weigh in issues, and it just seems like I think Alvarado can somehow pull some technical boxing, he can probably pull off the win, I think. But you never
Yeah.
know. I think with Brandon Rios, because he has so much heart, it's really tough. But I think I like Alvarado's chances in this
Check
one.
check this out. This might blow you away. Looking at
Okay.
the Vegas odds, Mike Alvarado is a 3.5 to 1 underdog. Oh my
Really?
gosh. Brandon
Wow.
Rios is a 5 to 1 favorite.
That's
I don't know,
unbelievable.
man. It is unbelievable. If I were a betting man, and sometimes I am, I might have to go with Alvarado just for how that good that plus 350 looks on the money line, man.
Yeah, I would take the under as well, big time.
Yeah.
Um, We have about 15 more minutes here. It was a big story that really it happened when we got off the air here. Now is the ongoing saga with Holly Holm and Cecilia Braekhus. The story broke on Ring Magazine, .createtv.com. Lenny Fresquez, who promotes Holly Holm, stated that the only way the fight's going to happen with Braekhus is if there's a two-fight deal, one match in each person's territory. What's your opinion on this? Because originally, to my knowledge, Fresquez didn't even want to fight there at all. And it seems like with their promotion in terms of Cecilia's camp, they don't think Albuquerque is a worthwhile place to have to fight. What's your opinion of this news following the story as you have?
Well, I think I like it, and I think they both deserve it, to be honest, to have a home and home matchup, just because of the fact of how reluctant, one is to fight the other in Europe, being the case for Braekhus, or here in Albuquerque for Holly Holm. Um, I think that's the best way to go about this. That's the way both parties get what they want. All right, we'll have this fight happen out in Europe. You negotiate, or excuse me, you set up the TV deals and all of that. We'll have the fight in Albuquerque, and we'll set everything up here. But as the as this contract or as these discussions keep going, the more it's changing. And recently I posted kind of a back and forth banter between Cecilia Braekhus and Holly Holm's management, and just by reading into what the two camps had to say, it did seem that it was Braekhus's camp that was a little more reluctant to actually make this fight happen according to specific terms. And I think a home and home deal would benefit both fighters. I guess the specifics, I mean, it's not just as easy as, hey, we'll fight there and you'll fight here. It's the matter as who's putting up the money for the fight. So I think it's very interesting, but I like it. I'm in favor of a home and home kind of deal.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of the home and home deal, who do you think that favors more? I mean, it seems even on the surface, but I think you mentioned, earlier, especially when they were putting this fight together originally, that this fight could be on the undercard of a big European matchup. And if, certainly Breakus, gets her fight in Europe somewhere, could that be on a bigger European boxing event? I don't see this fight being on an undercard of a big American event. Could you see that happening in Europe?
I definitely do see that happen in Europe. You have some pretty good fighters actually happening out of there. And before I offered maybe something like an Arthur Abraham fight, where since he was champion on the super middleweight division, Arthur Abraham, for those who missed the fight, actually lost his title. Arthur Abraham, the reason I thought a good undercard would be a good main event for this fight to happen under is because he's with the same promotion that Cecilia Braekhus is. So, I mean, unfortunately, that won't be happening, so that throws that out the window, making it a little more difficult for a world championship male fight to happen in the main event for the Holly Holm versus Cecilia Braekhus contest. It's the home and home event. The situation, I think it benefits Holly Holm just because of the fact Cecilia Braekhus said, I won't fight you in Albuquerque, I'll only fight you in Las Vegas, or we fight here in Europe. Now it's here in Albuquerque and in Europe. So obviously it benefits Holly Holm because she'll get a fight in her hometown.
Mm-hmm. Do you see this happening now? Do do you see these negotiations, possibly coming to a rightful conclusion in which, this fight does could happen eventually?
I think, I mean, you think it would help it if it didn't happen in Las Vegas. The next thing would be a home and home kind of thing, and that's what's going to happen. And I definitely hope so. Neither fighter, if it's as simple as fights in their respective home regions, I mean, really has an excuse for this fight not to happen now, is what I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is very, very, I wouldn't say weird. It's just that's the kind of fight game, it happens all the time. We got about 9 minutes to go, man. Really, anything else that's catching your eye in the combat sports world? Usually our shows are packed, usually right till 9 o'clock, but
Yeah.
we have the rarity of kind of, just talking here before we go.
Well, just I guess one thing that happened over the weekend that people probably weren't familiar with. I mean, I was familiar with it just because I ran into Cub Swanson's younger brother, Kevin Swanson, a few weeks ago, and he actually had a fight this weekend. He was actually 9-0, and he actually lost a pretty big fight in his home region of Southern California. It was likely that he were to fight in Steve Swanson, excuse me. Thank you, Wolf Fox, for the correction. Steve Swanson was more than likely going to be, recruited by the UFC with another victory. He would have gone 10-0, and it was a little difficult to actually. For people that didn't see the fight, it was one hell of a fight. So it was very poor, I guess, commentating by the public. I mean, by the announcer.
Okay.
Kana Hyatt is the name of the individual who actually fought. MEZ Sports Pandemonium 8. Have you ever heard of the Pandemonium events, Justin?
I have not.
I never had. So apparently they're based out of California. What they do is a mixture of MMA and a mixture of boxing. They had decent boxing cards on there as well, and it was interesting to see how they did it. They did it in a ring. They'd have two MMA fights, then they'd have a boxing fight, two MMA fights, one boxing fight. So they had a total of 4 boxing fights, and it seemed to be a pretty interesting mix, and people enjoyed it. I mean, the crowd was going nuts over it, so very interesting. So I really enjoyed that mixture, and it seemed like Team Tapia tried to promote that type of event here in town, and it seemed to work. I liked how this promotion actually did it. The only thing about it is that it ran till about midnight here, local our time, which is 11. It was 11:30 out in LA. So, I mean, maybe a little less amount of fights when it does come to that.
Do you happen to know if it was a split decision or unanimous?
No. It was the fight actually ended in a submission. Steve Swanson.
Oh, he got finished. Okay.
And they battled. I mean, it was a war.
Okay.
And for the longest time, Steve Swanson did have his opponent hurt several times, but ultimately it was a triangle choke that ended Steve Swanson. But a great fight either way. So, pretty good fighter at 125 pounds, Steve Swanson. So keep an eye out for him.
Yeah, I don't think the dream of the UFC is over by one loss.
Especially when you're 10-1. Definitely not.
I mean, let alone Bellator World Series of Fighting. I'm sure he'll get picked up fairly soon.
No, definitely.
Yeah, it just seems pretty weird.
How do you feel about the mixture, the hybrid events?
It's tough. It seems kind of gimmicky to me, and I don't like MMA in a ring.
Neither do I.
I'm totally against that. I know,
Neither do I.
Boss Rudin was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he has some very interesting observations about mixed martial arts, in a ring versus a cage, and how there's disadvantages of being in a cage. But I just think, just in terms of safety and just in terms of just restarts, I'm in favor of mixed martial arts more in a cage setting. That's just my opinion. But it just seems, I don't know, it just seems kind of gimmicky to me somewhat. Like, that's kind of the appeal. I don't have too much of a problem with it. I'm just more in favor, I think there's events, we've seen Muay Thai in a cage. People are doing that now. It just seems like, since the cage is being popularized with the UFC and Bellator on national television, people are using more of the cage. So I don't really have a problem with that. We saw a hybrid event, a long time ago with Fight World. That was kickboxing and MMA bouts. So I don't think it's too unusual with mixed martial arts and kickboxing. So it's not really a big deal to me, but I'd rather them stay separate. That's just my opinion. How about you?
I mean, I see what you mean. I don't like it in the ring.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. It's extremely dangerous, I think, for a limb to get caught or someone, what I've seen a lot is when people are tripped near the ropes and they get kind of like the whiplash reaction from hitting the bottom rope and their neck coming up. It's dangerous.
I
don't like
agree.
it. I don't like it, but if they're going to do it, I guess do it the right way and have some exciting contests. But as far as I'm concerned, it's MMA. Leave it in a cage.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The photographers might hate us for saying that just because they get some pretty clean shots when it comes to the ring, but
That's true.
but definitely I think it's pretty dangerous. So keep it in the cage.
Pretty much besides the Mike Alvarado, Brandon Rios fight.
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah,
Gennady
go ahead.
Golovkin fights this weekend.
Really?
You didn't realize it. Yes, he is fighting this weekend. So
Is that on
who have
HBO or Showtime?
it's not going to be on either. He's actually fighting
Really?
in Monte
What?
Carlo, Monaco. He's fighting out in Europe. He's fighting Nobuhiro Ishida. Ishida is a middleweight out of Japan. It's rare to see a Japanese fighter in those higher weights. So pretty big deal when it does come to it. Ishida is the interim WBA light middleweight champion. So the same belt that Austin Trout currently holds, Ishida was once the holder of. He lost that title to Canelo Alvarez's brother, Rigoberto. And Rigoberto, of course, lost it to Trout. But if you remember who Ishida is, you might not remember the name, but he's the Japanese fighter that actually knocked out James Kirtland when James Kirtland was undefeated.
I think I do remember that. Yeah.
James Kirtland was 27-0. He went down 3 times in the first round to Ishida. So Ishida, coming off of 2 consecutive losses, he fought Paul Williams in February of 2012, and then Dmitry Pirog, who's one hell of a middleweight, in May. So I think it's a downslide of Ishida's career. So pretty good time for Gennady Golovkin to, I guess build up his record against him. So really strange that it's happening in Monte Carlo, out in Monaco, in Southern Europe. So
That's bizarre. That's one of the knocks on boxing, man, is when you have a star like Golovkin and he just disappears for one fight. You don't even see him. It's just truly unfortunate. Like, this would be nice if somebody, ESPN, NBC Sports does boxing, and somebody picks up this fight just for
someone
one time.
pick up this fight. Let me see if I can actually find what it's actually on. It's going to be on some strange pay-per-view. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I'm pretty sure you folks will be able to find it on one of your sneaky streams.
Yeah. Just real quickly while you're finding that, Jorge, some breaking news here. This happened pretty recently. It looks like Lamar Peterson's name has been cleared after earlier suspicion that he failed another drug test, according to Team Peterson. It's been reported that he's been cleared of all negative tests from his February 22nd win over Kendall Holt.
That's like saying, I didn't do it.
Yeah, pretty much, because it says a fighter tested positive for that HCG substance, but not Peterson. So we don't know who it is. It's like the Vitor Belfort situation where, somebody tested positive and people thought it was Vitor Belfort and it wasn't being him. Yeah. So it seems like the same situation here.
Here we go. The card will be distributed in the United States and Canada on pay-per-view by Integrated Sports Media. I believe it's like a $30 or $35 pay-per-view purchase to watch Gennady Golovkin. Yeah, so
I'm sure it's on the internet. You can probably buy it on there.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find it somewhere. So, I mean, hopefully they bring him back to the United States because I want to see more of this guy.
Yeah, I think he's a very entertaining fighter, no doubt. I think that's going to end our show, man. Again, you can get in touch with us through Facebook, Twitter, through YouTube also with the interviews. Jorge will be out there getting interviews from the Warehouse Rumble event. And also we have a playlist of all the interviews you've done leading up to the fight. Please check that out, youtube.com/lowblow505. Also get in touch with Fight Fans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream. That has our show along with the rest of the Fight Fans Radio family, so please check that out. Also check out their YouTube page that has our show along with the rest of the Fight Fans Radio network. So for Jorge, I'm Justin, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.
This has been The Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, USCombatSports.com, and SouthwestFight.com. See you later.